The source of any magical tradition is its practitioners. To understand the magic of ancient Egypt, we must first understand where it came from, who was practicing it, and who the magic was performed for. Hey folks, this is James, aka Thresciornis, and welcome back to the Scroll of Thoth. Welcome back to our series on ancient Egyptian magical practice. This is part 4, where we're going to be talking about those who practiced magic. But before we do, let's go ahead and take care of some business. Things going on at the Ko-Fi page. Just posted a video on drugs in ancient Egypt, and that is an exclusive, our first exclusive for Ko-Fi subscribers only. If you guys want to see that one, you got to subscribe. We have tiers now, and you can subscribe to our Ko-Fi for just $3 a month. Just $3 a month. It helps so much. But also, we're going to start doing tarot readings. I'm going to start doing tarot readings, which you can go to the Ko-Fi store. You don't have to be a subscriber to go and get a tarot reading from me. But those of you who subscribe for $10 or more a month will get a free tarot reading, 3-card tarot reading, every month. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Of course, all our Ko-Fi subscribers get the archive of the old Scroll of Thoth podcasts. They're also going to get 10% discount in the Scarlet Ibis Ko-Fi store there. So go and check it out. There's things now there for you to enjoy if you would like to help me out. So we talked a little bit about this subject in the first video, and if y'all remember, we are following along with Robert Craig Rittner's book, his excellent book, The Mechanics of Ancient Egyptian Magical Practice, and he mentioned some of that early on. But this might also be a video where we diverge from our friend Rittner a bit. I have some disagreements. I have some exceptions to what he's saying here. But still, I want to say, I just want you to remember, no matter what I say in this video, that Rittner, what he is saying is true. What he is saying is the evidence-based model. I just believe that there may be more to it, and there might not be as much evidence for something like that. According to Rittner, the source of ancient Egyptian magic was the priesthood. But before you just kind of take that with face value, you've got to understand who the ancient Egyptian priesthood were. Because these were not just people who were administering a flock. In fact, it's hard to say if they did anything like that, if they were anything even close to our modern conception of clergy. The Egyptian priesthood were highly trained, highly specialized individuals. Their job was to attend to the gods, because the god lived in the temple. That statue in the temple, that was the god. And it was their job to attend to the god. It was their job to give offerings to the god. It was their job to maintain the spiritual order of the universe through ritual and through praising the gods. And another thing, the priests were other kinds of specialists as well, because the priests were doing all the training. And here we're talking about metallurgy. Here we're talking about writing. Here we're talking about engraving, masonry, mathematics. All of these things were trained by the priesthood, and all of the people who practiced those professions could be considered priests. So, when Rittner says it's the priesthood who are doing the magic, well, that's a wide range of characters. That's a wide range of characters, not just someone who is only a magical specialist, but some of them were. Some of them were magicians for hire. Some of them were, please come to my quarry and get rid of the scorpions. So keep in mind, yes, it is the priesthood, but the priesthood encompasses a lot more than what we see in the modern age. And just to hammer the point across, this is something that makes me think about a question I get a lot from novices, from people who are starting a magical practice, and that practice includes venerating gods and making offerings. And sometimes they ask me, well, what do you do with these food offerings, these drink, after you give it to the gods? And well, the first thing I say to them, well, that depends upon your tradition, and you need to figure out what that is. Do that first. As for myself, I am not an ancient Egyptian, but I do take a lot of my clues from them. And for the ancient Egyptians, well, you eat that. You eat and drink that if it's a consumable offering to the gods, because you have to remember, these temples were communities. They were hubs of commerce and of learning, and it was those offerings that supported that infrastructure. That's how you had a specialist class in Egypt. It was the dissemination of the offerings given to the gods. So you give the god takes the spiritual efforts of the offering, but the physical essence, it's considered not good if you don't eat that. So I think that reinforces, once again, this entire temple structure, economy, really says that the priesthood and those who are doing magic is not confined role. It's not just a few. It's many. You remember that book that I've recommended a couple times that is kind of the cross between actual ancient Egypt and Hermeticism and later stuff, that Conversations in the House of Life? Well, what is the House of Life? Well, the House of Life were these special schools, is one way to look at it. Special temples, special administrative places where people were trained as scribes, primarily, where people were trained for other professions. And once again, everyone who was trained up by the House of Life was considered a priest. And it was a professional class. But it wasn't exactly like the wise men, wise women, or the sorcerers, the goets we see in ancient Greece. But neither were they something set apart from the people. These were people with jobs. And it would be a mistake to believe that all of the magic of Egypt was performed by an upper class. But let's get back to our man Rittner. And he starts the chapter with the somewhat infamous event in ancient Egyptian history called the Harem Conspiracy. It's an attempted assassination of Ramses III by members of the royal court. A big trial is convened. The trial is recorded. And it's from these records that Rittner and others have shown that ancient Egyptian magic was definitely seen as a tool. It wasn't considered bad or good, but it was certainly believed to be entirely real and could be weaponized, and could be something that you could be convicted of using if you were using it against the pharaoh. Quoting Rittner on the subject, Obviously, the great capital crime consisted of complicity in the attempt on the life of the king. Whether this was accomplished by magic or by physical force was irrelevant. Assassination by sword would hardly have been more acceptable. Comparable to a sword, magic was a weapon for the Egyptians, and the legality of its usage was dependent upon the identity of the intended victim. The records of the harem conspiracy thus reveal a condemnation of sorcery against the king, not a condemnation of sorcery itself. And once again, I think special note should be taken that magic and magicians were seen to have the power to kill the king. And that's not just a political act. That's a strike against the very order of the universe itself, which the pharaoh represented. Because magic is a force that can compel the gods themselves. An example of this, provided by Rittner, quoting a text called the Book of the Cow of Heaven. Moreover, guard against those magicians who know their spells, since the god Heka is in them himself. Now as for the one who ingests him, I, Re, am there. I commend them to your son Osiris. Keep watch over their children, and cause the hearts of their elders there to forget their magical power. They who act as they desire against the entire land using their magic, which is in their bodies. Remember in the earlier videos when we said that the power of magic ultimately resides within the magician? Yeah, here's a quote for that as well. And magic in ancient Egypt was something to be safeguarded. It was considered a powerful force. There were prohibitions against teaching it to foreigners, teaching it to rebels and troublemakers. It was definitely something that was guarded. Another thing that Rittner is keen to point out is that there is no difference seen between magic done in the service of the state, in the service of the king, or magic done for private individuals. It's still magic is magic. Rittner. Using identical methods and identical texts, royal and private magic are here distinguished exclusively by self-interest. Even this distinction grows evanescent once it is realized that the categories themselves are only illusory, for there are no truly royal or private magical spells in ancient Egypt, only priestly spells used for royal or private benefit. Of necessity, the ability to compose, copy, or recite such spells was limited to the king, the priests, and the scribes, who alone comprised the approximately 1% of the population able to read or write. Neither king nor commoner freely composed written spells or rites. The former did not, and the later could not. Rather, and exemplified by the warnings for secrecy quoted above, the composition and preservation of magical incantations, as well as hymns, rituals, and even medical potions, was the prerogative of the House of Life, the sacred scriptorium attached to temples throughout the country. Thus, there need be little surprise that spells and hymns so often overlap, since they were composed by the same sacerdotal group and derived from the same theology. Yeah, that's a long quote, and I did that one on purpose because this is where I'm going to disagree somewhat with Rittner. And I think it's obvious that the priests and the priesthood and the House of Life were a source of magic in ancient Egypt, probably the main source, obviously the most well-known source. But I find it really difficult to believe, and despite my own obsession with writing and the word, that all the magicians of ancient Egypt were literate. That would seem nearly impossible. And no matter how hard the temples tried to control it. And I don't even know if Rittner's really saying that here, and maybe he's saying that a lot of the priests were trained by rote memorization, and maybe that was so as well. But that also lends credence to the idea that there was an oral tradition. I mean, this is an ancient culture, and it's not, writing is a new thing for them, and it's a difficult thing. It's an expensive thing, and there absolutely is an oral tradition there, sadly one that we're never going to find a lot of evidence for. We're not going to find a lot of proof for. But if we look around at other ancient cultures and we see the magical practitioners there, I am going to say yes, there were other sources of magic in ancient Egypt. It wasn't just a trained priesthood. I would bet that they had their sorcerers as well. And Rittner goes on to kind of half-ass admit this. Quoting Rittner, admittedly, memorized incantations against crocodiles, snakes, infant disease, etc. may have circulated among the population at large, but the theological basis of even these popular spells suggests transmission from a priestly source. The priest, of course, was not immune to influence from the general popular culture, as is illustrated by the suggested impact of letters to the dead on execration ritual. Nevertheless, such influence in no way minimizes the central role of the priest as redactor. Okay, if you guys have seen my videos, you know that obviously I respect the scholars, I respect the Egyptologists, and I think their work is important, and I rely on it greatly. But I also think that what you're getting here at Scroll of Thoth is something special. It is something different, and you're getting the point of view of an actual magical practitioner. From someone who has seen the practice of magic, who's done magic, and who's going to tell you right now that this is not my experience. This is not how the occult subculture works. How it works is that the folk practitioners come up with an idea. The priests and the viziers, they steal it, they rarefy it, they codify it, they put it in lists and say that you have to do this spell exactly this way, to the point where it becomes useless. And then the folk practitioners steal it back again, take the important parts, and start the cycle all over again. Magic comes from the ground up, just like so many other cultural movements. To say that it comes from the top down, I question that. It's a give and take. It's a back and forth. But to say that is the ultimate source, I'm going to disagree. I think the more important statement that Rittner makes here is, once again, there's no difference between magic done for the state and done for the individual. There's also no difference between magic done for results and magic done to maintain the order of the universe. It's all Heike. Rittner describes a practice to illustrate this, and I know I'm pronouncing this wrong, this kind of phonetic interpretation of the hieroglyphs. Furniture is how I think it could be said. The translated meaning is to reach God. And this is a practice where a priest or some other attendant, some other person, an oracle, essentially, would consult the statue in the temple and speak to it. And because these statues were believed to be part of the living God, they asked questions, and those questions were considered authority. The people asking the questions could be representatives of the state. Quoting Rittner, intrinsically private, eliciting answers, revelations, and aid for purely personal concerns, the oracular procedure was no less sacerdotal, being generally administered by priests within the context of public temple festivals. Priestly authorship is even specified for the solitary, secretive performances of the ritual in the Demotic papyri of Roman date, which utilized lamps, bowls, and incubation to produce divine audiences through visions and dreams. The mention of a lamp in connection with a consultation by the necropolis worker Kenna suggests the existence of similar approved usage in Ramesside Egypt. If so, a formula for a furniture may have been contained in the royal roll for giving terror and respect, whose theft preceded the consultation in Papyrus Lee. Though incontrovertibly legal and religious, such consultations were nonetheless of a magical nature as well. The affiliation of the oracles to the power Heka has already been noted. And once again, these oracles were considered morally neutral, with the belief that seeking an oracle for foul purposes or an oracle to be given with ill will is possible. And there was even magical protection for that as well. From a papyrus held by the British Museum, Thoth declares, I shall nullify every evil oracle, every evil upset, and every evil thing which has been done to the son of and the son of my excellent servant. I shall make them recoil on those who did them, and I shall make them recoil on those who said do them. I shall never allow them to have magical power over him throughout his whole lifetime. Yeah, I can't pass up quoting Thoth to make my point. But let's go back to Rittner. Let him sum up what he thought was the identity of the magician in ancient Egypt. The foregoing analysis of the oracle reveals the interaction of religion and magic not merely in practice, but in practitioner. For as the priest was the author and compiler of magical spells and rites, so he was also the performer and magician. The role of the Egyptian priest as magician has long been recognized, especially for the lector priest, who recited incantations and hymns during temple and state ritual, as well as during private apotropaic magic and funerary rites. He goes on to say, in literature from the Old Kingdom through the Greco-Roman periods, the priestly qualifications of the magician protagonists are almost invariably specified, being indicated as either chief, lector priest, or scribe of the house of life. The direct priestly affiliation of magicians is highly significant and strongly suggests that itinerant magicians did not exist in ancient Egypt. So to that, I say, bollocks. It just kind of flies in the face of what we know about every other culture. It wasn't just priests who were doing magic. And I think the important part of that quote is that Rittner starts out with, in the literature, that which gets preserved. Paper is expensive. Inscribing on a stone wall, even more expensive. Thoughts and the deeds of the common folk, they're not getting written down. If there exists an oral tradition, it's with practitioners amongst the common people, and they're just not showing up in the record. And I know that makes it hard. I know what I'm saying here doesn't have evidence. And I do love evidence. And it's just not going to be there. But I think context matters. Context matters. And in the context, I think we can say, yes, our man Rittner's right. The priesthood was a tremendous source of magic in ancient Egypt, especially written magical spells, especially magic done in service of the state and for private individuals. But it probably was not the only game in town. Speaking about the only game in town, I said that this was probably going to be the last video in this series, and it's not. There's other stuff to do. So I'm going to do those, but not right away. Not right away. And I know this channel is called Scroll of Thoth, but really I am a magical practitioner, and I want to do other things. So we're going to break away from a while, come back to this series when I have something new to say about it. We're definitely going to do some stuff on emergent magic. Really wish you'd watch those. I think they're important. I've got some new projects coming up soon, which I think are going to be really exciting for you as well. And like I said, I'm doing tarot card readings again. This is something I did some time ago and then had some issues with my point of sale system. And it just got left in the wayside, and I really enjoyed doing them. So I'm going back. I'm going to be selling tarot readings, and it's an affair. I'm starting out with 3 card readings. You can get those for $15 at the Ko-Fi site. You don't have to be a member just to get a tarot reading. And I'm going to set up an altar. I'm going to bless it. I'm going to purify it. I'm going to pull these cards, and I'm going to make you a very nice 3-card tarot reading. I'm going to take pictures, and I'm going to write it up for you. And at the end, I'm going to pull out my Portals of Chaos deck. And I'm also going to pull a card from that for you as well. And I'm going to send that to you as a PDF. I think they're really nice, and I think they're very helpful. A lot of people have enjoyed them in the past. Yes, we also have our oils from Scarlet Ibis Apothecary up on the Ko-Fi site. Just so you know how shipping works, it's $8 shipping for any order. You can order as much as you want. That's way less than I actually pay for the shipping. So it's a good deal, and I'm going to have the incense up soon, but right now, please give those oils, those handcrafted oils, take a look at those, and like and subscribe. Like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm doing things. There's a lot more to come. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.